All right, we are on the hour. Welcome everyone on this nice sunny March day for our series known as the Ability Grand Rounds for the West Virginia University Center for Excellence in Disabilities. These are an opportunity for us to learn from our peers, whether that is a training program that they've developed and studied, research in general, or some other method of contributing to the disability group as a whole and sciences as a whole. So before we get started with our presenter for this month, I wanted to just remind everyone to please put your name and affiliation in the chat. If you're comfortable, please come off camera, although I completely understand if you're eating lunch late and or driving or anything like that, but it just helps make it help us connect. If you have any question along the way, please feel free to put it in the chat, raise your hand. We encourage that discussion greatly. And then at the end, we will definitely make time for more discussion if nothing comes up during our presenters' talk. So on that note, let me introduce our presenter. So we're talking, as you can see from the save the date this month, the title is Creating Social Impact from Barriers to Opportunities in Intellectual Disability Inclusion in Hospitality in particular. So we have Dr. Ashok Manoharan, sorry about that, who's a senior lecturer or senior associate professor in strategic management, College of Business, Creative Arts, Law, and Social Sciences. He joins us from Flinders University. So we have an international speaker, and we're very appreciative of your time on that point. And with that, I will continue to let people in and monitor the chat, but I will turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you. No, good afternoon to everyone there, and thanks for joining in. And Professor Leslie Cottle, thank you for your kind invitation. And it's a pleasure to be joining with you in this presentation. It's fantastic to come and present to you. Um, so welcome to the presentation. So this is, if you see the slide, I'm just giving a little bit of a preview of our university. This is the Flinders University in South Australia. And generally, in any Australian, when we do a presentation, we start by acknowledging the Aboriginal and Torres Island people of the state. And Flinders University is located in Ghana land, and we pay our respect to the people in the past and in the present. So this is an acknowledgement. If you go to any Australia, you would see that we start by our presentation, the land we are, and then we acknowledge them as such. Right. So Leslie has given the introduction just for you to see where I am. So the topic of the day is going to be creating social impact from barriers to opportunities in intellectual disability inclusion and hospitality. My name is Ashokkumar Manoharan. I go by the name Ashok. I am a member of Center of Social Impact within the College of Business, Government, and Law, and that's a new name, Social Science, within the Flinders University, which is located in South Australia and Australia. So my research falls under two broad categories. One is around diversity, equity, and inclusion, specifically towards the hospitality sector. And the other one is about, developing an industry talent brand, which is a theory recently I developed with my colleagues, and where we look at how to mitigate the attraction and the retention challenges of sectors where they are talent deficient. So today, my focus is going to be around intellectual disability. That's what it is. Now, possibly some of our attendees are wondering why I'm working on hospitality. Generally, when we do a business research and social science, you need to have a context in which you are working. So for many decades ago, I was trained to be a chef in a hospitality sector, and then I came into teaching. So that is a sector I've been following over the years, and I know how it is, and I have the love for the sector as well. So that's what it is. So this is our agenda today. So I'm going to give you starting by giving you a bit of a context. Now, so what is this about? And then we did a systematic literature review. Possibly that is what Leslie, you saw that systematic literature review would have been a motivation to invite me and then I'm going to present my project one, what we did and what kind of impact we created, and then move on to project two, what we did, and then the kind of social impact we really created out of those projects in Australia, and then the question and comments, anything I would like to take as such. Right. So I'm happy to take questions as I go. If you have any questions, feel free to, raise your hands and, you can open your mic and I'd be. So here is the context. Now we say that there is 1 in 5 Australians have a disability. Okay, so that is like 4.4 million people. We would look at it in Australia. So there is some form of disability we are talking about. Either it could be physical or it could be intellectual. And again, the severity of those disability would vary, somewhere to mild. Now there are data saying 80% of this disability is very mild disability, which you can't even notice. No, only the 20% of those disabilities are moderate to severe as such. They have a severe conditions as such. So how does the employment life cycle generally looks like? So with the people with disability, you would see that generally after their schooling, we do have a lot of specialist schools, and generally what happens is they finish the schooling there, most of the people, and then they get into volunteering. Just excuse me. They go for volunteering. That's how they get started. And then we do have a concept of here as sheltered employment. What is the sheltered employment? Sheltered employment are more like social enterprises where they employ only people with disability and people with intellectual disability, and then where their pays are much lower actually. No. So when we say much lower, we would say that it is like $2 to $3 an hour. No. So that's how they start. And then they get into a proper employment as such, so where it could be in terms of retail or hospitality or some other food and beverage manufacturing, of it could be of any nature as such. So this is how we generally see, how people are moving from one to another. Some people are very happy. They are just doing volunteering. Some people, they feel like, okay, I need to do something. Okay, I need to get paid. Why should I be getting support only from the government? So they get into the sheltered employment. After working there a while, they also feel that, oh, now I need to go and work why I'm getting only $2 an hour. I need to be also paid properly. So I need to really look at that as well. So that's how they really look at it terms. And if you look at the context, let us look at the hospitality industry. So hospitality industry, as any other country in Australia, they do struggle to attract talents, basically. A lot of the times, the sector sees people coming in, young talents coming in, and they use the sector as a kind of a stepping stone. They don't see the youngsters, they don't see it as a career. So the sector has been hugely depending upon migrants. Australia is a land of migrants. We do have a constant inflow of migrants. But there were two important macro impact which happened to the sector. The first one was, the growth of gig economy, like Ubers. Okay, so a lot of migrants, what they started to do was they quit hospitality and then they started to go into the gig economy, like taking, driving cabs because the new migrants found that more comfortable because they could turn on their clock, or they work anytime they wanted, and then they could turn it off anytime because hospitality will have strict times and duties and no rosters and kind of thing. Okay. The second big impact it struck was the COVID. Okay. The pandemic had a big impact in the sector. And then many people, many workers within the sector felt that they don't want to work on it because they felt either there was an uncertainty because many hotels were closed during the time. Australia, we are in a huge island. There was a strict border closure and things like that. So that made it really difficult for them. So they felt like, okay, so this is not going to be an industry in the future where I will have a stable job. So they felt like they don't want to work anymore. But some people, they also felt like it is risky to work in the sector. They felt like, okay, many of the hotels, we were converting these hotels in Australia, especially in South Australia, we converted them into medi hotels, which means people were used to quarantine there. People were being sending from hospitals to stay in the hotels during the COVID time, and the workers there, they felt like, okay, my God, this is not the place for us because it's not very safe. Okay. So that is when our research kind of turned, because my research within the DEI was either looking at the migrant workers, and how to integrate them into the workforce and how to manage them into the sector. And that is when, at that time, 2021, we got a paper published on looking at the diversity in global hospitality industry. And then we felt many of these large hotels are working on disability. Okay. So people, the hospitality industry is a potential attractive employer for people with disability because there are shifts, there are multiple different jobs you could do it, and no, so it is a good place because they all you need is a generic skill for you to get into the sector. You don't need to have a very, very specialized qualification for most of the jobs. And then it is also about it is a shift kind of a thing. So all that kind of I felt that okay, this would be a good one. But barriers do exist. We need to clearly understand that people with disability or intellectual disability will not be able to do all kind of jobs within the industry or within a hotel. So that's how the barriers exist, we say. So with that in mind, what we did was we started with a systematic literature review. This systematic literature review specifically looked at answering three questions. Why do hospitality organizations implement disability employment programs? What barriers and facilitators influence the employment of people with disability? What are the perceived benefits and challenges associated with employing people with disability? So we were starting to look into this. This systematic review um, was done between 1990. No, we took the year as 1990 to 2022, I would presume. And we looked into this time frame. We searched for articles, any articles which published in terms of employment of people with disability in the hospitality sector. And we searched around 8 different databases as such. So in total, we looked at 30 plus articles. I don't know the exact number, which I'll get back to you in a minute. It'll come to me. And so this is what we really found in the systematic literature review. Now, there are a couple of important conceptual trends which was looked at it. They were looked at the diversity practices, the attitudes towards disabled employees, leadership, and the characteristics of the business. These were some of the things. But why hospitality organizations are implementing diversity programs? That was the first question we looked at it. And it was very clear that, one is compliance and legal obligation. There are some countries where you need to employ, they do have a quota system. Say, for example, Korea. South Korea has a quota system and you need to employ a certain percentage of people with disability. Okay. And the second one was very interesting because hotels were also looking at accessing new group during the period of labor shortage. So they started to look for people with disability, and it also created a new source of competitive advantage. It gave success to them because when a hotel employs a person with intellectual disability or a disability, it is viewed as it's a most inclusive organization. The stakeholders feel they are okay doing the right thing. That creates success to them. Okay, and it is about the top management commitment to develop employment opportunity for disability. The classic example is like we do have a group of hotel here by name Crown. The Crown is the one which have casinos and hotels in Australia, and they do have a program by name Crown Ability. So Crown Ability employs more than 120 people with disability, different forms of disability, and they've been really, really successful. And the main reason here is the top management is committed that they want to do something to disability here, and the last and the reason is the availability of financial support. You do get government financial support, and that's the reason they want to do. So there are so much. there are barriers and facilitators. Some of the facilitator is about its workplace accommodation. Now, say there is flexibility in hospitality. So people could start in the morning, it depends depending upon the role, or they could do an afternoon shift or a night shift. Sometimes they would be also able to do it. No, it could be the front of the house job or the back of the house job. It depends upon it. Okay. Pre-vocational support. Okay. So there's been a lot of support in terms of teaching and job readiness skills, job coaching, on the job support was there. So there's been a lot of disability awareness training that promotes awareness, acceptance, and support generally. Barriers, the first and foremost barrier, we would call it as the perception of increased cost. Okay. See, this is something I want to really underline. It's not about just, oh, it's going to be a huge cut. It's only the perception. No, it's not even the cost is that high, uh, and fear of negative customer reaction. So this is often a big concern in hospitality because you're really talking about the aesthetics of the industry as a guest when people come in. What do they feel about? No, would us like, no, when we go for a restaurant, a fancy restaurant, do we like to be served by a waiter, no, who has some kind of a disability, no, or a waitress, some kind of a disability, those kind of questions. And then concerns of co-workers, no, resistance, saying that, okay, does the co-worker, are they happy to be really, working with them? But if you really look at it, there are some benefits as well. If you really look at it, so there are lower levels of turnover. So that is a big thing you would look at. And they are highly motivated, reliable. They have enhanced commitment. They improved workplace safety outcomes. The innovation is high. Customer satisfaction is high. And it also boosts the public image and the approval as such. Challenges, of course, we can't ignore that. We found that through the systematic literature review, there's been a limited skills, being inflexible, emotional instability is there when we employ them. Sometimes you also see lower level of productivity, not being able to cope with complex tasks. They require more supervision, mentoring is needed. Okay. And there's uncertainty regarding how to manage employees with disabilities. So this is a kind of the barriers and challenges we found. So see what happened was with this particular systematic literature review is in one way we found that, okay, this is fantastic. Okay. We were able to comprehend the literature, what we have, especially around disability and hospitality in employment, but we were also able to identify the gaps. So this framework we developed, it was very clear that, okay, this is what happening in the sector. So this is the time we really thought about it. Okay, it is really, I was thinking that, okay, it is really something we need to do for the sector and we need to, um, make some change. And that is where what happened was, so we did submit an application in 2022 to the Endeavor Foundation, and then we got a funding. So this is the first project we did. No, so when I say the first project, it is really getting into the field and making some changes in the field. So what we were looking at facilitating sustainable employment of people with intellectual disabilities in hospitality SMEs. So this funding was purely for intellectual disability. It was not for other disabilities. So that is where the focus came in, which was fantastic. I was able to get the grant with my colleague there, Claire in the middle, and then Janice Jones at the end, from Flinders. So what did we do in this? So here, if you look at it, the focus is on small and medium enterprises. See, if you look at the hospitality sector in Australia, more than 94% of the sector small and medium enterprise, right? So we felt that the need is, we need to really look at the SMEs, then looking at the large hotels, because large hotels do have existing resources, whereas the small hotels and the restaurants and catering venues, they don't have the resources as, say, for example, I gave you an example of the Crown Ability. They don't have a Crown Ability manager. They can't have a manager. They can't have assistant managers to do all that. So we felt that we need to do. So what we did, we started with the data collection process. We started with a qualitative interview with small and medium enterprises. we approached more than 80 to 90 small and enterprises, and it was surprising that more than half of them declined even to attend an interview. Okay, so that kind of gave us a very clear picture. So that kinds of, so when people say no, that also communicates something to us. So one thing it immediately communicated to us was their time poor. No, they don't have time. No, they don't have time to talk about this. They don't have time to implement this. No, or even think about it. But we did get a good number of responses, around 35 plus. So we spoke to them. Now, what would it really help them to employ people with intellectual disability? Okay, and the first immediate one was it is about the government assistance. They felt that if the government is able to support them to include, to make in terms of wages, in terms of workplace adjustments they have to do, they could do it. Education and support program was another important thing. We were able to look at it. So that was really a big one. And then they were also looking in terms of, they're saying that development of more streamlined process for recruitment of employees. They were not 100% sure how to recruit. I'll come to the DES ongoing support at the end. And they also mentioned about the clear information and advice about the legal responsibilities and obligations. And they also wanted some examples or demonstrations of success of other SMEs as well, anyone who is employed. So DES is we call DES, it is abbreviated as Disability Employment Service Providers. Okay, so this is an organization in Australia. So it is a very interesting organization. If a business thinks that they want to employ a person with disability or a person with intellectual disability, all they need to do is they need to contact a desk provider. This year they changed the name. They changed the name to Inclusion Employment Australia. That is the new name for them, right? So all you need to do is you need to call them and you need to tell them that, hey, I'm interested in employing someone with intellectual disability. And then they do the rest of the job for you. They find a person, they train for you, they apply for the government funding, and they would come to your workplace and they would see if there is any modification is needed to be done. They could also apply for a grant with the government and they would do everything. So that is a great system in Australia, to support people with disability to transit into the workplace. So that support is also something they needed. So then we launched a survey, so to the various parts, and then we also found 98% of people with this intellectual disability currently or in the past. 22% is employed in the last 12 months. No, and people with intellectual employed vary of front or the back of the house. See, if you really look at the literature, especially employment of people with disability, there's been a lot of debates about, okay, you are employing them, or you employing them in the front of the house, or you employing them in the back of the house. Okay, so people are always put into the back of the house. People like housekeeping department, where it is not a guest facing kind of the role. You need to be doing some kind of a linen, you're working in the laundry, they might be working in a food and beverage, or they might be working in a kitchen, like a kitchen hand or a food and beverage person, where they would be cleaning and wiping the plates and racking the plates and things like that. So that kind of thing. So there were also concerns in terms of the cost of work, absenteeism, turnover, attitudes of co-workers, supervisors, and senior managers was a big thing. So before I move on, I just want to go back. So people who agreed to be interviewed, there were 35 of them, if my memory is right. Yeah, 35 exactly interviews. And if you really look at them, these were the people who had some kind of a lived experience with people with disability. They had a family member with a disability, or they had a friends, and some of their friends' family had some disability, so they employed them in the past. These were the people who really gave interviews for us, but it's not about the rest of them. Right. So what we did now. So we had the survey, we had this interview done. So what we went for is we went for a co-creation process. Okay. See, co-creation is a big thing, and so this is something I should have given a disclaimer before starting the presentation. I'm in a business school. I'm a business and an organizational researcher. So that is the kind of the lens I apply. Uh, so co-creation is a big thing within the business and social sciences currently because we feel that any decisions we are making or anything we want to implement, we just don't want to take a one person perspective, whereas we want to involve the stakeholders who are part of this ecosystem, we would call it, and then develop something. So we had employer, we had a small and medium enterprises employer coming in for the co-creation activity. So small and medium enterprises here in Australia, we defined in terms of the number of people we employ. So small is something, a firm who employs somewhere between 5 to 19 employees, we would call it as a small. And the medium size is somewhere we would say 20 to 199. That is a big, no, that could be really big, but that is what a small and medium we would say. We had industry peak bodies. We had the Australian Hotel Associations coming in. We had Club SA coming in. And then we had a person with intellectual disability as well. So we had an SME owner, a part of it. We did had hospitality education providers, and we also had inclusive employment Australia providers. We call them as that is the current name. As I mentioned previously, they are the disability employment service providers as such. So interestingly, what they said was, okay, we did a co-creation activity to create a toolkit. I'll show you the toolkit in a minute. So interesting, the outcome of this particular co-creation activity, it was very clear that one, they are very time poor. Number two, they can't read too much of information. And three, they wanted something handy which they could pick it up and they could just, it's like a go-to kind of a brochure kind of a thing they want to do, uh, like a back-to-back kind of a thing. So that is where what we developed was we developed a toolkit resource, which was a website with all the details, but at the same time, no, we developed, let me correct this. We developed a toolkit that is nothing but a website. But what we did is we also created a toolkit resource actually. So this is what we developed. We had a two-pager, very simple. I apologize for the second picture. I just noticed that it is not as clear as the first one. We were saying that like what are some of employing what is the some of the people with disabilities, what is the benefit, what are the positive outcome to the business. The mythbusters, we did added something simple. No, see that is Australia. Everything we see is you keep it very simple and no and easy for access. And then on the page two, we had a QR code in the middle which says how to employ and manage a person with intellectual disability. I left scan that QR code, which is also something I have given in the site for you. Please play around it whenever you have time. And if you scan the QR code, it will directly take you to the toolkit website as such. Okay. It will go to the toolkit website, and then you have a lot of information there. You have case studies, you have our papers published, and all this kind of stuff. But towards the end, if you see, we also have another QR code. So that is the most important QR code according to me, because if an employer, they scan that QR code, they could really go into a website and they could find a disability employment service provider there. Okay. So simple. Now all they have to do is they scan it and they would ask for a postcode. We call it in Australia. I think in the US, it would be the zip code. You type in the zip code saying that, okay, this is where I am. It is going to give you a list of disability employment service providers, and then all you need to do is so according to the funding body, this was a huge success. This was developed only for South Australia, where I am, but it was a huge success in other parts of the Australia as well because employers really loved it. So they felt like, okay, this is fantastic. We want to give it a try, and all those kind of things. So what we did was in terms of impact. No, we had an official launch of the toolkit. It went out to the media. During that event, we invited the small and medium businesses coming to Australia, coming to our event. And we also invited the disability employment service providers to have their stalls in the event so they both could really communicate. No? And then I took the opportunity to go and do multiple presentations in tourism forums and industry forums and all those kind of a thing. And then uh, we felt that because we could have the numbers, we could see really how the traffic in the website, what we had. And the most importantly, SMEs approached us on employing with people with intellectual disability. So if you really look at this particular toolkit, it might have a lot of information there, but the most important thing here we did was we created a forum for this disability employment service providers and the small and medium enterprise, hospitality firms to connect together. That is the main thing, no? So it looks like very simple, but that is something, these were like two people who never met, no, and they don't know much about this, but we made that effort to connect them both and giving them the basic information what they have to. So that was a big thing. That was really, really a big thing we did as such. Then, okay, we felt, wow, people are contacting us. Okay, how do we get employed? Not kind of stuff, which was really good. Then we moved on to the project two, which was a big thing. So project two, what happened was, we felt we call it as diversity pathways as this particular project. This was a larger group of people. We felt that we want to do a co-designing disability employment strategy with people with disability that will include industry mentors, disability employment experts to create employment opportunities in fashion and hospitality sector. So when you say disability, people with a disability, here we are defining them as cognitive disability. Okay, and this particular funding came from information linkage and capacity building program, basically. So that's what it came from as such. So it was a very interesting product. The project is still live, even though we got this in 2023, so it is a 3-year project and we are still working on it. I'm going to share what we have done. So this was a pilot testing project more for South Australia because we want to do only for our state. And as I said, we want to have a co-design for disability employment strategy and looking at the hospitality and fashion retail as such. So this was a very interesting project, and especially selecting these two industries because within the team, we had two members within the team and we had expertise. I had the expertise in hospitality, but I also had a colleague who was very interested and keen on fashion and retail. But interestingly, what happened was, no, this is where I keep telling that, but it was a proof that hospitality industry has always been open to DEI initiatives because they've been in the forefront of it for the simple reason they have to serve to diverse customers and guests. Okay, so they've been always open. Whereas the retail, we tried harder and we were never able to pass the gatekeepers. And even when we were able to pass the gatekeepers and talk to them, um, they were not open to it. Say, for example, from fashion retail, we said, okay, let's cut down the fashion. Let's go to any retail. And we tried so many different places, but we were not of any help. So finally, what happened was we started with doing only with the hospitality as well, which was interesting as such. So here, what we did was based on the previous experience I had with the hospitality and some other colleagues in different areas, we started to do a co-creation process. But here, the focus was large hotels. It was not the SMEs. It was large hotels as such. Okay, this is what we did in the co-creation. So people with cognitive disability was involved. We had 4 people. Industry mentors were involved. We did had people, the top level people from industry, both in terms of hospitality, both in terms of disability sector. Disability employment experts were employed, and we also had employers, employers such as the Mantra Hotel, the Sky City, AHS is a outsourcing company in terms of housekeeping. They were in Pullman and Ibis. There are 2 different brands, and Sofitel is another one as well. Okay, so that is another important thing, and we do have a paper here. I just gave to you. So this is a paper we wrote with we call the people with cognitive disability. We call them as community researchers, and this is a paper we wrote about the co-creation process. How did we do with them actually? Very interesting. I'm sure this was published in a Disability and Society, and this might interest many of you actually. So what we did. So in this, what we did was we did recruitment. No, so first step, what we see, it is a pilot project. Okay, it is not creating an employment and saying that okay, these people would be employed for a long term. Okay, it is a pilot project to see how we go. So what we did was we started with recruitment. We used the disability employment service providers, and then we went first to the hotels and we spoke to them. And once they said yes to it, then what we did was, we recruited using the disability employment service providers. Then we employed them. Okay. So sorry, I'm missing a point here. As we employed them, the first step, what we did was we worked closely with the operation managers of the hospital of the hotels, you know, in terms of job crafting for those people with cognitive disability who are employed. No, so basically they did interview and then they felt what are they really good at, what they want to really do, and then they job crafted because that is one of the barrier of employing people with disability because they are not going to be fitting in for all the role. But at the same time, we need to also look at it like they are very happy to do repetitive roles, which is kind of repetitive, and then they are very happy, right? And they're also very happy to work in the front of the house because they feel like they want to talk to they want to talk to people in the front of the house. They want to interact with the customers and then everyone. That is what we did. Now, one particular hotel, what they did was there was an executive housekeeper. She was really passionate about. She spoke to the person, and she found that no, they created a new role. They called the role as a linen runner. So this is the person you would have seen when you check into the hotel and they clean the rooms. They have a trolley in the floor where they will be cleaning the rooms. This linen runner is the person like he or she would be going to different floors, looking at the trolley, whatever the linen has been going low, he will come and stock it actually. So that's what the person would do. And the person fitted in really well. And and an interesting fact is the person is still working actually. So then the next step, what we did was we went for an ongoing mentoring for the operations manager who is dealing with the person with cognitive disability. So we did had a mentor who had a lot of experience with handling a person with disability in hospitality sector, and that was a mentoring. They did mentoring, they did one-to-one mentoring. They also had a group mentoring with the other hotels who were employed. So there was a peer learning happening there. There were support, there were also ongoing support. And then this went for 6 months and then the project concluded basically. So we said that the project is now concluded. It is up to the hotels for them to make a decision whether they want to hire them, continue to hire them or etc. So interestingly, if you look at it, so we created again a toolkit. I have given you the QR code for you to scan it. We call it as diversity pathways. And if you go to the toolkit, we do have resources for you in terms of disability awareness, preparing to hire, working together to achieve success. Okay. So the earlier toolkit was only a document kind of a thing, but this toolkit has videos and proper explanations and steps and everything. The simple reason is we had more resources and we had more time and it was a bigger team and we could do more here. So all you scan it, you go to this website, you need to create a simple login there. Once you create the login, all these resources are free for you to access it as such. So this is what happened. So we have to say that it had a big impact because we started with one hotel and then there were 6 other hotels within the state. They would say they'd come in, they would do it, and each one employed 1 or 2 people. So which was fabulous. So the biggest social impact of this particular project, which is continuing to happen now, is this was noticed by Accor group of hotels. Accor group of hotels are the biggest chain if you look at in the Asia Pacific. And they said, okay, we want to really take this up for our entire group. So what they did was, so far they have welcomed 35 employees with a cognitive disability across the groups of Pacific businesses. See, this program was started in South Australia, where I'm located, where the Flinders University is there. But later it was launched in Melbourne, and then this was launched in Melbourne earlier. So this article came in 2025, earlier 2025, and now it has been rolled out into Victoria, New South Wales, and Queensland, the other states. Okay, the other states of the country. So we see this is a big impact. this is a huge impact of our project, what we have created, and we are so happy that we are able to make changes. See, one of the greatest advantage of this is when a big chain of hotel is going to follow that, when they are going to implement, when they are going to hire people like this, people with cognitive disability, that is going to set an example for smaller hotels, and they would tend to follow. And now they see that it is really, really good. So that is a huge social impact we are looking at. The project would be wrapped up by end of mid of this year, where we are planning to do a conference, industry-wide conference, inviting everyone, larger group, and sharing the success story of our 3 years journey. What we are doing. Oh, sorry, I have to move this slide so you would know this. Okay, so this is what is published. I've been talking about. Sorry, I missed to move the slide. So it is a big impact we see out of this project. So to conclude, what I see here is, based on the experience, so people with disability, either the intellectual or the cognitive disability, they do add a lot of advantage and benefits to the hospitality businesses. But what we need is we definitely need that support, and that is where the disability employment service providers come handy in Australia. They come on the right time, they do the right things for the businesses. Once they do it, they see you need to have a job crafting, and you need to train your manager, but you also need to train your co-workers how to manage them, and it becomes a very big success in getting them. So as I was telling in the beginning, the impact of hospitality, where there were challenges to attract talents, but generally, if you employ a person with an intellectual disability or cognitive disability, what we see is they've been so loyal to the business. They don't take sick leaves. They don't take, unnoticed kind of leaves. They're not late to work. So all the businesses has been very clearly saying there's a lot to learn from these people, which is very, very important as such. So I'm going to stop here. So this is what is the presentation I had for you all today. And again, thank you for coming in. Thank you for listening. And I would be very happy. We have another 15 minutes left. I would be very happy to take any questions as we go. Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much. This is very pertinent to us. Does anyone have any questions that they want to start with?
Perhaps what I'm going to do is I'll stop sharing so that we have the screen for ourselves. And yeah,
Okay.
we'll have
I'll go
some.
ahead and start. I see that some people had to leave a little bit prior to the hour, and I wanted
Yeah.
to speak for them in terms of, and I understand um, you're not as knowledgeable about our culture or our situation, our employment situation here in West Virginia, but it sounds very similar to yours. If if groups had funding opportunities and they put a call out that's specifically for applications related to increasing our employment of individuals with disabilities, what suggestions would you give those groups that would continue moving forward? If they, understanding that they're not doing the survey yet, but based on your knowledge and your experiences and what you've learned so far in Australia, where would you put the money and the supports?
Okay. So there is. Right. See, the one primary thing I would put the money is, again, going back to the first project, the contextually I will put into the small and medium enterprise, right? So the second project is a huge success for us, right? But if you really look at, these are large businesses where they do have the resources and people are coming in and doing and helping out. There is a manager for social impact. He picked up this project and he was very happy about it, and he rolled out the project to the other states, and they are providing support and all those kind of thing, right? So if we are doing something, if we are extending the project, what I want to do is I would be really putting it some into the small and medium enterprises. That is the first one I would put in money. The second one, the scope I would also look at is I would pay more attention to job crafting, actually. No, because job crafting is a huge process, it's a huge step. I gave you an example of a executive housekeeper who did it. She did it just like that because she's been in the sector for such a long time, and it's a big hotel, and she knows that, okay, this is what I have to do. But let's imagine in a cafe, where only two people could stand in a cafe and they have a small kitchen in the back. So what kind of job the person is going to do it really? So that is a very big kind of a thing we have to really look at there as well. And the third one is about contextually and legislatively things would vary from one country to another country. Say for example, the role of the disability employment service providers, could change in the future, and or what happens after their support period ends, basically. Say the government is going to support in terms of salary for 6 months for these people to be working there, right? After 6 months, what is going to be the motivation? So are the businesses still interested to continue and employ them? No. So those are the some of the areas I would put it as such, the money there. No. So moving forward, those are the areas you would include and see that is an opportunity area for to work on, number one. And number two is also about, when you get the money, it's also about co-creation is a big thing. No, you need to be a co-designed approach, which need to be the front, back, and the center of the particular project.
Thank you. Any other questions? I really like your, of course, inclusion of individual disabilities in the planning and the implementation and the evaluation. The fact that they were working hand in hand with employers.
Yeah,
I think that definitely meets our philosophy for that. So thank you for that. And
I'm very glad to know. So recently, we are also seeing a shift from, or a push, that push is also coming from the funding body.
oh,
No, the funding body is clearly saying that, okay, you need to have definitely a person with intellectual disability in your team. No, and this co-creation activity is much, much needed, right? So, but had been said, it also brings in a lot of challenge, I have to tell you, because managing them is a big task. No, managing a person with intellectual disability, especially with our second project, if you really look at it, what happened was we had four community researchers working with us, 4 to 5 at any point of time, uh, and for us to make them to be there, and for us to make them to get engaged, having their needs are very different. Sometimes what we have to do is we need to really have a support person for some of the person with those cognitive disability, um, to be there with them. And so luckily we had an RA, and the manager of the project, she had experience in terms of supporting these people with intellectual and cognitive disabilities. So managing them also brings in some challenge. But if we manage them, if we ask them the right question, if we talk their language, let us put it like that, and some of the inputs we are going to get from them is super valid, and it really makes sense, even simple things in terms of saying that, okay, we are going to have an industry forum here. What do you think we should be really talking about there? Okay. So, and it starts with that. It starts with something like, okay, we are going to invite with people with cognitive disability. What kind of food do you think you would have it? And what would impress? From that simple thing to developing a toolkit and inputs and writing a paper. We wrote the paper simply with them. No, they are the co-authors as well. It's a very fascinating journey as such. Yes.
yeah, that's a manuscript in and of itself in terms
Yes,
of
it is. It
process, right?
is. Yeah,
Very
it is true. It is true. It is true. Yes.
nice. Well, all right. Well, we appreciate your presentation. We appreciate you taking your morning to spend with us
Oh, no,
for
absolutely. It's a
afternoon.
pleasure. It's a pleasure. Yeah.
Yes, and hopefully
No,
you'll
it's
come
it's
back.
great. No, yeah, thank you. No, it's great that no. So you have my email address, and people could also look for my name and things. I should have added my email address, which I didn't. But I strongly encourage, if any of your members, if they want to be in touch with me, they want to talk about, or they are putting something and they want to have more kind of information from me, I would be very happy to answer those questions and give them whatever we know. So I would be very happy to share. I also encourage the audience today and your members to go and explore those two toolkits which we developed and see how you felt. And yeah, and we also welcome any future collaborations if you think within the Flinders University, my team, and what you have there, because I think there's a complementing, because you come from the medical and the clinical kind of the side, and we use a social science. We have the business lens, and I think it would definitely complement actually. Thank you,
I like
Leslie. Thanks for inviting actually.
absolutely my pleasure, and we'll definitely work on the collaborations. So,
All right.
and
Thank you.
thanks
You have a
everyone
lovely
for joining
afternoon
us.
and everyone. All
Okay,
right. Cheers. Thank you.
take
Thank you.
care.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye bye.
You too.